All right. First off, as always, good day, class. Today we are going to be talking about um, the immigration from the East now, um, people from China, Japan, and then we're going to be talking about nativism and the political machine and the bosses. It'll make sense later on when we talk about it. So before we begin, make sure you have your packet, and if you don't have your packet, line sheet of paper will work. Just be sure you put on the side, in the margin area, warm up, notes, question and answer. That way I can see where each section is. Okay, so without further ado, let us begin. So here is your warm up. So analyze the picture, okay, and basically what do you see? Okay, now I get it. This picture is a little blurry. I do apologize for that. I tried to find a better quality, um, but some of the ones I found were either like really too light or too dark and stuff like that. So I do apologize for that. But yeah, just analyze the picture. What do you see? Okay. Now the second part of the warm up is this. Based off what you see in this picture, what do you think this cartoonist is trying to say? Okay, what's the point of this illustration, this political cartoon? What are they trying to say there? Okay, so as the lecture goes on, you'll find out more about this and about, if you didn't notice, the name on the collar, if you didn't notice that. We'll begin into that in a little bit. Okay, so but for right now, just make an educated guess. So, thing is, many Chinese people left China because their population was huge. There are other reasons, but one of the main ones was that China actually reached a population of 430 million people. That's quite a bit. As big as that country is, 430 is a staggering amount of people. So with that, with so many people there, unemployment was huge. Poverty was huge. Famine, you know, sometimes the crops didn't come in, and then you have a bunch of people to feed. And of course, the top people are going to be able to afford the food. And as it goes lower down the classes in the chain, the poor people are not going to be able to get any, or they're going to have to basically find it themselves. And the thing is, it made life very uncomfortable for people. So there were some people who were like, you know what, I want out. So they basically came to America because there was some reasons for them to come. One of the first ones to happen was the gold rush, the 1849 gold rush of California. A lot of people came to San Francisco basically for the gold. And it's not just the Chinese, it was people all around the world. People from our own country, people from, you know, Ireland, uh, Australia, you know, people all around the world came to came to San Francisco for the gold rush. Now, the other really big reason why a lot of people left China was the Taiping Rebellion. Now, this one, the Chinese government actually, since kind of killed 20 million people. Now, that's again, in a population of 430 million, 20 million is pretty big. Okay, it's a big number anyway. 20 million people on this rebellion, and this caused a lot of Chinese people like, you know what, might as well leave. Um, there's fighting, there's all these reasons, like I just mentioned, the famine, poverty, unemployment, and they're like, you know, we'd have better chance in America. So that's why a lot of them left. Um, and again, it's not just the Chinese. People from the Pacific area came to America. Now, one of the really only jobs that they could get was working on the railroad. All right. I didn't mention it before in the gold rush era, But there were a lot of Chinese people who did try to go for gold, but then the California government made it rough for them to, own land, state claims, things like that. Them and the Mexicans. Um, so it made it hard for them to make a living. So they had to do things elsewhere. Um, and like I was saying, besides them being discriminated, they were forbidden from shopping and doing businesses at different stores, right? So a lot of them were like, you know what? Let's create our own stores and shops and things like that. And that's what they did. Um, and the thing is, one of the biggest things that they did was actually washing clothes. That was one of their big money makers because they did an excellent job and they did it cheap compared to other places. So this was the beginning of the Chinese Americans, in a sense, staking a claim and building something, not only for themselves, but providing a service for the American people. So, besides now, we talked about the Chinese, now we're going to talk about the Japanese. Now, the Japanese people were actually a minority of the immigrants that were coming into the United States. If you look at a map of the world, Japan is considerably smaller than China. Okay, so that would explain the amount of people coming over. There would be a lot more from China. But that changed from about 1900 till 1908. But the thing is, they brought a lot of industry to America. Okay, now from the 1800s up until 1910, the people who came were processed in a two-story shed on the wharf. Um, Last video we talked about Ellis Island. Um, they really didn't have something like that in place. Um, in the West Coast area, they just had a two-story shed on the pier, basically, and on the wharf, um, and it could fit up to 500 people. And there's been times it reached the capacity of 500 people. Um, so the thing is, if you've never been to San Francisco, there's actually little islands um, within the Bay Area, and one of them became known as the island of Alcatraz, and then the other one was Angel Island. Well, on January 1910, Angel Island was opened up for immigrants. That's the place where they were going to house them. Now, a lot of these immigrants that were coming to this country were from Asian descent, or a lot of them were males in their early teens, in their early 20s. And the thing is, their wait process took months. It took a long time to get them processed and moved into to become citizens of the United States. Now, during the wait time, some people wrote poetry on the walls of Angel Island. And the thing is, it's still there to this very day. And if you look to the picture on the right, you can actually see carved into the wood some writing, some poetry. There's plenty of examples on there. There's some, I believe this one's on the outside. There are some that's actually written on the inside where the beds were. They used to have three tiers of beds. So there'd be one person here, one person on here, and another person on there. And that's how they fit so many people inside the Angel Island. So that's where they were. They had to express themselves, and that's what they did. And if you go to there to this day, you can actually see it, and there's actually plaques and stuff that says what they say. Okay, so the thing is, not everybody welcomed the new immigrants with open arms. This is the beginning of nativism. And you should know this word based off your vocab words. You should know what it means. So this is why we do it, so I don't have to explain it to you guys. But basically, it swept through the country. And it was mainly aimed against Asians, Jews, and Eastern Europeans. Now, many nativist people felt that the old immigrants were perfect in a sense for America, while the rest who were coming in were a burden. So this is how, if you broke it down, how a nativist person would argue that old immigrants were better than the new immigrants. When it comes to wealth, they felt that the old immigrants weren't all poor, that they had some money, that they had something to provide, some type of a currency, you know. Whereas the new immigrants were all poor. You know, they came with nothing. They're dirty. They're this and that. Okay, remember, this is what they thought. It's not true. It's what they thought. As for education, um, they felt that the old immigrants, that hey, they can read, they can write, and they have some type of skill that can be used in our country. Now, you have to remember, the old immigrants would be people from like England, France, things like that, um, where they spoke English. Whereas people from the Asia culture and people from the Middle East and Jewish people, um, that oh no, they can't read, and they don't know they don't have any skills. It's like these guys are from Asia. They're not gonna know English. You know, they're not gonna learn that first. That's not gonna be their first language. So how can you expect them to become right away and be knowing English? So that's what I mean, that their ignorance um, kind of really showed at this point for those people. Now, adjusting to the culture, they felt, hey, these guys, they're smart, they can do it with ease. How they'll realize how things in their old culture, or where they're from, it's not the same. So when they come here, they'll be able to adapt a lot easier. Whereas the new immigrants, hey, they're too much into their old ways. They're going to try to um, bring their old style from their country over here, and they're going to try and make our country into their country, things like that. Um, and that these people won't change. They want to adapt to our culture. You know, when it comes to their previous countries, they were like, what, the old immigrants, their country are very democratic, so they know how the process works. Whereas in the new immigrants, they felt that they came from non democratic countries. You know, now it comes to religion, this one was huge because they felt, hey, these people are Protestant, they're Christians, whereas the new immigrants are Catholic, they're Jewish, they're Orthodox, they're Buddhist, they're whatever you want to believe, whatever religion, Muslim, and things like that. Because they're not Protestant or Christian, they're not with us. Okay. Now, some people try to say the numbers. Oh, they were in big old floodgates of bunch of immigrants. But if you look on the picture to your right, there are more people from the old immigrant countries, which is total about 7 million, than any other place. You can add up the rest of the places from the new immigrants, the immigrants coming from South America, the immigrants coming from Canada, and from the Asia countries. They do not add up to the number that came from the old country, the old immigrants. So they couldn't use that to say, oh, we're being overrun by these people. Okay. So again, look at that map, and it's really interesting. And when these people try to say we're being overrun by these immigrants, they're being overrun by the old immigrants, not the new ones. So that to me is pretty funny.